Thank you all. Thank especially to Yuki and to Pam doing a good job with service. And tonight we're very privileged to have our friend and teacher Shikan enlighten us on the fifth grade precept. Thank you.
Okay, well, thank you. I'm happy to be here on Christmas. I will talk some about it towards the end of the talk, the fifth grade precept. But I was going to talk mostly about how my Christian faith has Christian upbringing, and I still have some Christian faith. Pretty strong one, actually, but it's been stronger in the last 6 months or so because my youngest son has become a Christian, and he was baptized in a Methodist church last June, so 6 months ago. And it was really a nice process. The pastor of the church is from South Korea, a very bright and compassionate, open-hearted person. And you could tell she really loves Danny, and is very, helpful and kind, and really motivating him, inciting him to be excited about his faith. And I'm really grateful that he has a spiritual faith. Of course, I would prefer it to be Buddhist, but since it fits him, the Christian faith fits him. What's really important is not if he believes what I believe or practices what I believe. What's important is that we enjoy our shared being together, and that's what's been deepening for us. So, and we studied the 10 Commandments and the Apostles' Creed with her in 2 separate sessions before we did the baptism. And, when I was a child, I always felt kind of strange in church. And I remember the last pastor seemed to be a guy. He was younger than my parents, and he kind of had some kind of midlife crisis or something. He was talking about Jesus as an existentialist. And my mother, who is a pretty diehard Christian, she was a philosophy student in college. And so, after the service, when you go out to meet the pastor, she started berating, Jesus, an existentialist? No, he was the Son of God, So he got she got pretty upset with him. But I don't know, I'm kind of grateful that I have a family upbringing that is, deeply spiritual. And I did have an interesting experience when we were in church Thanksgiving weekend, and we sang the hymn "Joy to the World," and it was quite interesting to me, and I got pretty emotional about it when I realized, some of the lyrics must have been written by someone who was maybe some kind of a Christian saint, and it turns out it was a guy named Isaac Watts, who was a 17th century English author, theologian, and hymn writer. He wrote the lyrics to it. And it really, what really deeply affected me was listening to the lyrics, and, joy to the world, the Lord is come. Let earth receive her King. Let every heart prepare him room, in heaven and nature sing. And that reminded me of the process of meditation, open our hearts, let our attention fall back on our source, on the awareness that we are, and make room to receive the spirit of Buddha or Jesus, whatever you want to name him. And heaven and nature sing. So we sing along with heaven and nature. It's all one. That's kind of the Trinity in Christianity, I think. And then the second verse is, joy to the earth, the Savior reigns. Let men their songs employ. Why fields and floods, rocks, hills, and plains repeat the sounding joy. So that repeat the sounding joy, that reminded me of Rumi's poem. And I'm going to talk a little bit about Mitch also, but Mitch really loved Rumi and talked a lot about Rumi in the poem Love Dogs, and I'll read that one too. But Rumi had a poem where he said, flow down, down, down into ever-widening rings of being. And so I thought of the rings of being, the vibrations of those rings of being are like our experience. That's what our experience is. You know, Jesus said the kingdom of heaven is within. And so the vibrations of those rings of our being is our experience. It is our love. It is our joy in the spirit. And another teacher, a Hindu teacher that I follow, Anandamayi, probably the greatest spiritual female master that we know of. She did mantra practice as part of her devotional practice with her students. And actually, Mitch turned me on to the Jesus prayer at one point. And it's just a simple little prayer. I used it as a mantra for about 4 years. And it's, Lord Jesus Christ, have mercy on us. And what happens when you use a mantra, because I'd never done that before, when you use it for over a period of about 4 years or shorter, it starts to happen on its own when you're doing meditation or you're doing walking or driving. For walking and driving, it was just kind of going on for me. And then I was reading from Anandamayi. She says, when you take this mantra practice to heart, you will at some auspicious moment discover the rosary of the mind, and then you will continually hear within yourself the praises of the great master, the Lord of creation, like the never-ending music of the boundless ocean. You will hear the land and the sea, the air and the heavens reverberate with the song of his glory. This is called the all-pervading presence of his name. So just that oneness of her teaching the song, The Joy of the World, you know, and Rumi and Mitch together are like a powerful teaching for me. And I think a powerful teaching for people that are deeply engaged in spiritual practice. Mitch and I also enjoyed a phrase from the English poet William Blake. He said, "He who binds to himself a joy does the winged life destroy. He who kisses the joy as it flies lives in eternity's sunrise." And Mitch also turned me onto Brother Lawrence. Probably some of you also maybe heard about that book from Mitch. It's called The Practice of the Presence of God. And Brother Lawrence, you know, he wasn't much of a philosopher, but he was so devoted in his practice. You know, he loved work, and he actually welcomed suffering because he knew that it brought him closer to God. And in Buddhism, we don't really say that in that same way, but being willing to face our suffering, you know, not grasping at our experience or turning away from it, is the same discipline practice. And that is the offering of our life to the Buddha way, to the Bodhisattva vow, and the deeper realization that we are one with all beings. And that the joy of our shared being, realizing that's what love is. And Mitch and I, you know, we talked about these things a lot. And he was a great inspiration to me, a dear friend. We actually traveled to Thomas Merton's monastery, the Gethsemane, back in 2008, and visited his grave, and, you know, were there for a while. And that was beautiful. You know, Jesus said, the kingdom of heaven is within you. And actually, the pastor at Danny's church, the South Korean, In Young is her name, when we do the communion service, she would say, this body is not really your body. We are all one body. And this is the blood of Christ. And she said, she would quote Jesus saying, you will be one with me and I will be one with you. Like Jesus said, my Father and I are one. In other words, we're all in the same. So she's getting dangerously close to being a Buddhist, I think. And being from South Korea, she might have some Buddhist DNA or something. I don't know. So one other prayer from another teacher I like, Rupert Spira. He spent time in a Christian school, and he quoted a prayer that he would say every day for many years when he was like in grammar school and maybe in junior high. And it's a concession to the separate self, but it's a turning towards our source. And it was a hymn he would sing. He said every day for 5 years, and it goes, God be in my heart and thinking, God be in my eye and seeing, God be in my ear and in my hearing, God be in my mouth and in my speaking, God be in my heart and in my understanding. And Thomas Merton had a saying that reminded me of this. He said, Lord, you've heard the cry of my heart because it is you who cries out from my heart. And he also said, Lord, you are the love with which I love you. So to me, it's a beautiful blending of the depth of the Christian devotion and the Zen devotion, the non-dual understanding. So, and I want to talk a little bit about the fifth grave precept. And actually, many people have told me, and I agree with them, that the best book on the precepts is Reb Anderson's Being Upright. So he has a whole chapter on the precept of no intoxicants. And the chapter title is Everything is Inviolable. In other words, it can't be violated. So I think of it in terms of our essential nature can't be stained or harmed by human experience, because it's not confined in the body or in the mind, but it is the source of it all. So it can't be defiled. So inviolable isn't another word for that. Could be undefiled, not defilable, and undefiled. And so the subtitle, where nothing can be brought in, everything is inviolable. This is exactly the great brightness. So Reb, he quotes Dogen saying, here and now is the place. In other words, this is all we have, is the present moment, the here and now. Here the way unfolds. Without any tampering or manipulation of what is happening, the way of freedom from suffering unfolds right here. So another way of saying that is the boundary of what we can accept is the boundary of our freedom. So in Buddhism and, in the example of Jesus, if we can learn to accept suffering, we're aligned with reducing suffering, but we're open to the possibility that suffering can be accepted. And that's liberation. That's the boundary of our freedom dropping away, and our freedom then has no bounds. So the Buddha teaching is that there's nothing to add, and we already are what we seek. So we open to that possibility. And experience really, in that sense, no longer veils our nature, our Buddha nature, but experience begins to shine with our Buddha nature. And I think that's what Dogen is talking about, where he says, where nothing where nothing can be brought in, everything is inviolable. This is exactly the great brightness, the brightness of our essential being. And Maizumi Roshi was once asked, we studied his book in our group here. He was once asked, what are 3 basic beliefs that veil our Buddha nature? And his reply was, there's only one. And it's the belief that our nature, our essential nature, can be veiled. So Reb is seconding that, saying, where nothing can be brought in, everything can't be defiled. Nothing can be defiled. And so we learn to accept pain and suffering on deeper and deeper levels. And it may even hurt more, but bother us less. So Reb goes on in this chapter to say that, we give away our impulses to seek relief, to seek pleasure, or turn away from pain. We give it away just by not grasping, and not turning away. And we learn that we can be happy in the here and now, and that's all that we need. And in giving away all of our experience, we're deeply opening to the possibility that, the truth of impermanence is that we're actually made of this joy. We're made of the very substance of the spirit of all creation. And so in giving away the pain and the joy, letting it dissolve as the truth of impermanence, the power of impermanence, the power of our life force is always doing. In doing that, we're also giving away that sense of being confined to a separate body-mind. And so our afflictions of addiction are not exhausted by personal effort, he says, but by practicing the paramitas with them and fully engaging the afflictions by moving with them and with support of a sangha. He says real practitioners are a conversation, not a group of separate body minds, but one conversation together. And we're learned that not to try to control our experiences, and also the power of confession. Like he mentions the 12-step programs, Alcoholics Anonymous. He had great respect for them because, as he says here on page 139 here, he says, admitting an impulse, in other words, an impulse to drink in that sense, is different from trying to control yourself. Saying I'm an alcoholic really means I'm not in control of myself, and I'm not going to get control of myself. This is quite enlightened. By such an admission, you acknowledge that it's not by personal effort that you become free of these abusive impulses. The impulse to abuse has to be graciously uprooted from some deeper place. You need to understand how the impulse to change your state arises. The impulse to modify and manipulate and thus abuse your precious life comes from turning away from what Dogen calls the great brightness of your being. In this great brightness, nothing can be brought in. Being upright with this great brightness, you have no desire to bring something in. Okay, so I've been talking quite a while. Why don't we leave it there? And maybe we might have to go over a little tonight. Thank you.
Thank you, Shikan. I always find this precept very relevant in this holiday season. There is so much to be intoxicated with. And the idea of non-intoxication involves both being intoxicated and not being intoxicated. So what is there to be intoxicated with? The lights, the music, the decorations, all of these holidays that seem to come together at this time of year are very intoxicating. Some people who never think about their birth religion think about it in an intoxicated way at this point in the year, because it's so pervasive. It's all around. It's in the malls, it's in magazines, it's on television, it's on the internet, it's on the radio. It kind of surrounds us. And that's kind of an intoxicating way to look at the rest of what we think the world is. So that is non-intoxication, when we can walk the middle way of this, realize this is a very temporary kind of delusional part of the year, where people tend to be more charitable, kinder, eat more, drink more, watch more football, of course. So that can be very intoxicating. When this part of the year leaves us, what does that leave us with if we are so intoxicated with this? It leaves us with nothing. It leaves us empty. The idea of non-intoxication is the ability to take all of this in, appreciate it, and let it go, and realize how temporary and fleeting it is. To walk the middle way and say, I really like all these palm trees with these weird lights around them, but by January 15th, they'll be gone, and they'll return to their normal state of just ordinary palm trees. Be intoxicated by that. That is the non-intoxication of looking at things at ordinary mind, at ordinary trees, at the ordinary order of the world that is fleeting, that is temporary, and that is so beautiful, but not permanent. So we avoid intoxication in that way. We are able to kind of hit that reset button, like that commercial for Staples, that you hit the red button. It says, that was easy. Well, it is kind of easy if you look at this time of year as full of grasping and clinging to intoxicating delusions of what the world could be like if there was snow in Florida, if there was a fat guy with a beard in a sleigh who had flying reindeers, if there was one true religion, which there is not, if there is one true way of expression, which there is not, that becomes very intoxicating at this time of year. I think the Buddha way is to kind of sit back and enjoy it. I love the lights. I love the decorations. And I love when they're all taken down. And that, because then I can enjoy it again next year. So that is, to me, the precept of non-intoxication. Being able to enjoy something and do without it at the same time. To be able to enjoy something and let it go, whether it's lights, chocolate, religion, decorations, artificial snow in Florida at the start of a race that I did the other day, the Jingle Bell Jog, music, all of the accoutrements of this season, to let them go is as wonderful as when they arrive.
Yeah, thank you, Gato. That's beautiful. Also, if we let it go, that's also what Reb is saying about, offering it all. And when nothing can be brought in, then nothing can be lost. So, and then it's okay to let it go, right? Because you're not losing anything.
Thank you, Shikan. Thank you, Gato, both, for wonderful, inspiring thoughts. and guidance. I guess I think many American Buddhists grew up in perhaps in a different religious tradition. So for me, the beauty of interfaith is seeing all the commonality there is among different traditions and celebrating that. And as Gato reminds us, living in moderation creates more balance and wholeness in our lives, and not getting too caught up in one thing or another, whether it's food, whether it's entertainment, or anything that distracts you from what you're supposed to be doing right here, right now. That is something that our meditation practice helps us to see and realize and let go of. So let's hear from anyone else in the peanut gallery.
I was going to share, I haven't been to any Buddhist events for, holidays, kind of thing, for a while. And I went to an event today, solstice, celebrating solstice, which anything else has to do with cosmic things I like. And and it was lovely, music and the lightings, the whole thing was just beautiful. But and one thing, once in a while they would say, okay, now we're going to meditate for a little bit. And so, this happened a few times, but every time they had all the stories, and there was, I was kept waiting for the silence, and I felt like I was going to drown, because I wasn't used to having, having all the story for, lengthy, it's like, where's the silence? It was interesting, you're not really looking for the contrast, but you can't help to feel the contrast, in different situations like that. And, I wasn't really purposely being critical about it, but I guess my mind wasn't used to that. And it was just an interesting experience. And then it also made me appreciate, this practice so much more, having the stillness and the silence that, be able to go inwards. And, but I agree with what Gail said about, there's so much emphasis in everything in the outside, not in the inside. Excess of music, you can't get, I like music, but when everywhere you go, it's like it's overdone, And anyway, food, everything is just a little overdone, and so it's definitely moderation is a good reminder to have and to appreciate.
I'll be brief, but I just wanted to also express my appreciation for this practice during this time, but not just during this time, all the time. And it was my first kind of season of meditating when things were getting a bit hectic and things were being with that and being present for a lot of that, but then also welcoming the silence, welcoming the darkest night of the year was a great practice for me, to just open the windows, hear the quiet. A lot of people weren't out and about in my neighborhood, and just be with that and come into this day today that was a little busy earlier and just still be with all of you and just have that silence. It's a gift. So thank you.
Data, would you like to remind us of what's coming up?
Yes, I'd like to make some announcements. Thank you, Jushin. So I sent out an email today about our Joino Kani New Year's Eve celebration. People really enjoyed it last year. It's from 5 p.m. to 7 p.m. We start by reciting the 108 gates that every human being passes through at some time during the year. Those gates are sometimes thought of as difficulties or obstructions, but we have thought about them as opportunities for practice. So after that is recited, we sit for a brief time and hear the big bell struck 108 times. It's really beautiful. After that, everyone we chant Enmejuku Kanan Gyo, and everyone is given the opportunity to sound the bell and to kind of bring their resolutions or vows for 2025 into the room. No one says their vows. And to ring the bell and to kind of offer it to the rest of the world. So everybody gets to sound the bell. Afterwards, we have noisemakers, we have food, we have conversation, and everyone gets to go home by 7 o'clock so that people can spend New Year's Eve with their families who possibly have a more traditional way of greeting 2025. But it's really beautiful. If you are coming in person, please email me so that I will have a noisemaker and food for you. If you are coming online because you live a distance, please ask Jushin for the link, the special link that you'll need, because this is on New Year's Eve, which is on a Tuesday night, but we do meet here on other nights, so we can meet here on Tuesday night of next week. The other announcement I want to make is welcoming someone new, Sarah, who was very anxious to come and see what Zen is in South Florida. And I really wanted to, I usually don't say anything personal as far as announcements, but the fact that you all showed up at this season of kind of abbreviated time, I really appreciate it. I appreciate that Yuki and Pam just jumped in to this service position at our monthly futsatsu, which is very different from our other service during the month. It's the first time either of them have ever done futsatsu. It's not a long service, but it is very complicated. Lots of bells, I guess you guys noticed that. Lots of